Okay, so now what I want to do is start lecturing on chapter 10, okay? Again, website where I can always send the worksheet later, I guess. I'll just do that. I probably should have sent it before, so, well, let's just do it. Let's just go through this now, I guess. All right. Okay, so now what we're going to do, okay? All right, we'll do it later. Okay, so now what we're going to do is look at chapter 10. I know I did start going through it last time. I really do feel better starting from the beginning, I guess, so to say, in chapter 10. So let's do that. So basically here, what we're doing is we're looking at statistics in this chapter. And in statistics, what you do is you're going to gather, analyze information, and you're going to make predictions about the information you get. You're mostly going to be studying and analyzing groups of people or objects, actually. And from the studying, you're going to make predictions. I mean, that's really what you're going to do. You're going to analyze, how a group of people react to this or whatever. You're basically going to deal with groups of people or groups of objects. I mean, that's what they're kind of doing now with, as far as I know, at least with this COVID vaccine. They're trying different things and they're seeing how people react to it. But statistics is used in a lot of places. You might see it on commercials where they say like 4 out of 5 people like product A, or out of 100 people, 90 of them lost weight due to our diet pill. Something like that you'll see. Like surveys and stuff. So statistics do come up in a lot of places, statistics. So in this chapter 10, in the beginning, we're going to see different vocabulary, like populations, what that is. That's actually the group of people or objects that you work with. And there's also this notion of samples. I mean, you'll see this shortly, but with sample, okay, usually the populations are not going to be like 100 or 200 people. They could be thousands or tens of thousands. I mean, you could be working with everyone in the state of New York or even all of the United States. That's a lot of people. So what statisticians generally do, people who work with statistics, they'll look at a sample. We'll see what that is. We'll see that shortly. And then we'll see ways of getting that sample, called sampling methods. As you'll see, you have to be kind of careful when you form a sample. Mostly because things can go wrong, as I mentioned in number 3 here. You can have bias, as we'll see what that is later on. And in statistics, they're going to do experiments, and we're going to do observational studies. There is a difference between them. Experiments is actually where is what people generally use to test, I guess, a treatment, like with the COVID vaccine. If they have this different vaccine and they're testing it on people, they're actually going to perform experiments, as opposed to something like an observational study. So we'll see what that is anyway. And there's also presenting data. That's like graphical stuff. We'll see that later on. But now let's keep going. So again, what we like to do in statistics is we like to study different groups of people or objects, learn about them. And what you do is you work with large groups of people called populations. And basically the population of a study that you're doing, that's the group you're collecting data from. It's the group that you're studying, basically. The group you're analyzing. I mean, yes, it could be people, but it could be other objects as well. I mean, for the most part, with us at least, it's going to be people. For instance, you might wonder about all of SUNY Oneonta students. I think I did this example last time. We might wonder, for instance, how many hours on average do SUNY Oneonta college students read each week? Typical, for instance. And when we say reading, though, we mean like, reading for fun, reading for classes, that kind of thing. That could be a kind of question that we're interested in. You know, we want to, for whatever reason, we want to answer that question. We want to study that. You do have to be careful when we do these studies in that we have to be specific about our population. If I just said, for instance, instead of SUNY Oneonta students, if I just said SUNY students, that would make it sound like all students that are enrolled at a SUNY college. That would be a lot more students to work with. Or if I just said college students, well, you know, on every college campus, it's almost like a different atmosphere, if that makes sense. I mean, you can probably expect that at Harvard or something, you know, the results would be very different than if we analyze students here at SUNY Oneonta. So we have to be specific about the population, is what I'm saying. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. And even with the SUNY Oneonta students, we have to be very careful. In that, you know, you don't want to just ask students that are philosophy majors or students majoring in a humanities field, like history or philosophy or English. You know, because what about the science majors? They're probably going to have different amounts of reading. I mean, each major has its own amount of reading, so to say. I mean, I'm not sure which major has the most reading, which one has the least, but you know, you can kind of expect that different majors are going to have different amounts of reading that the students have to complete. I mean, I would think history would have a lot more reading than math majors would have to do. Of course, I could be wrong about that. So you do have to be specific about your population. I mean, even if you were to only ask seniors, right, or just freshmen, that could mess up the results too. You know, we said SUNY Oneonta students, so we can't just focus on seniors and we can't just focus on freshmen. So not only do we have to be specific about the population, and also we'll get to this. There is this notion of a parameter. That's just a value you're calculating using data from the whole population. I mean, later on, we'll see, like, when we average, what do we mean by average? I mean, there is a definition for that, and we'll see that later. So when you're working with the whole population and you're getting data, you're calculating a parameter. You could actually do that using a census, for instance. That's when you survey the entire population. So if we wanted to know how many hours of reading each week do SUNY Oneonta college students do, that's our population, that would be calculating a parameter. How many hours a week they read. And yeah, we can use a census. We could probably go up to every SUNY Oneonta student and ask them either through a phone call or I guess walk into their dorm or off campus where they're living or whatever. Plus, that's going to be very tedious. I mean, I definitely don't want to do that. I don't have the energy for that, or the time either. So that's why we like to look at samples. So a sample is just a subset of the population you're working with. But you have to be careful, though. It's kind of like what I was saying before with the population being specific. You know, you can't just focus on senior SUNY Oneonta students. You can't just focus on the SUNY Oneonta students who are history majors, right? Because not every SUNY Oneonta college student is a history major, for instance. We have to make sure our sample is representative of the population. And when we work with a sample, we're looking at a statistic. That's when you're getting all the data from a sample. Like how much in a sample, how much reading do each student in the sample read? How many hours a week does each student in the sample do a week? That would be a statistic because you're working with a sample. All right. So we have to be careful with our sample, right? In that we want it to be representative of the entire population. That's what I'm trying to say here. Okay? Now, there are certain methods that one can use to actually make a sample. We'll see that shortly. These are just examples that I just mostly got from the book. I thought it'd be good to try out. So for instance, let's say a group of researchers, they want to determine the average length of trout in some lake. You know, it's a type of fish, the average length of it. What researchers do is they catch 20 fish from that lake and decide to measure their length. Okay, so the question would be, what's the sample and what's the population? Well, the population would be all the trout in the lake. I mean, and the sample would be the 20 they catch. You know, they want to analyze, they want to learn about the trout, all the trout in the lake. That would be our population then. The sample would be the 20 they're catching, the ones they're actually looking at. And the length of the 20 they catch, that would be a statistic because you're analyzing a sample. I mean, I don't have that here, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to say. Also, here's another one. The college is reporting that the average age of their students is 28 years old. Okay, so is that a statistic or a parameter? Well, we can assume that they have access to all of their students' data, you know, like their age. So that would be a parameter, meaning it's the whole population, in other words. In other words, we can assume that when they report the average age, they mean the whole population. And you have a parameter when it's data about the whole population. If it was a sample, then it'd be a statistic. But we can assume it's a parameter. I'm pretty sure the college knows has a listing of all the ages of their students, so not just their age.